not, to exert power, but because they represent us. Because they need to control it so that companies or foreign governments don't control it. And having access, of course, to the source code of that is vital. Because if you don't have the source code, so you can't compile the source code into a working program and check that that is actually the same as the stuff you're running, then how do you know what the computer does? It's very, very hard to actually check it without having access to the source code. So if a country wants to actually be a sovereign country and be in charge of its own affairs, then you need to have control over this software. Now, these are some areas that I think are important. If you do voting computers, poor sod, then you need to have access to the source code for that. Of course, everything that your national government does, communications, file storage, stuff like that, parliament things, you need to have control over. Your energy infrastructure, because without that your nation falls apart. Your defense systems. If you buy a Joint Strike Fighter at, I think, $80 million a pop, but the software has a kill switch, and the kill switch is in the Pentagon and not in your defense ministry, then basically what you're doing is you're outsourcing your Air Force to the US. And you no longer have your own Air Force. What you have is sort of an Air Force on loan until somebody flips a switch and the airplane dies. Now, the UK Air Force actually made a big stink out of this. They said, if you don't give us the source code, we'll not buy the plane. Regrettably, our government hasn't made that point yet. I hope they will. Of course, in the middle, that's a logo of our internal security group. Ooh, there we go. And basically the equivalent to the American FBI or the British MI5. Now, of course, the police infrastructure, the justice system needs to be in control of its data. The Dutch justice system just had a 2-day computer outage because of a MSN virus from 2007. It was really cool. What that means is I am not going to talk to the police if I witness a crime, because my name will be written down in some document which is then open to be hijacked by a virus, and thus my name can become known to the people I'm testifying against. So I'm just not going to talk to the police until they get their shit in order. So I hope they will. So other things like air traffic control, the national media, these are all things that we need to control ourselves if we take ourselves seriously as an autonomous country. Now, the French gendarme, which is sort of the French national police, 90,000 people, are doing this. They're doing it for various reasons. National security is one of the reasons that they mention. The other is the fact that it saves them about 50 million euros, which is also nice. So they're switching all of their computer system to Ubuntu Linux from Windows and various other things they had. And they are now in the process of doing that. It's one of the biggest implementations right now in government. Now, I talked to you about the Spanish Civil War earlier. Last year I found this little document. And it turns out that the U.S. Declaration of Independence, which is, of course, one of the big all-time good political documents, was actually inspired by the Dutch Declaration of Independence, which predates it by about 200 years. Or so these people say. And, of course, being a Dutch person, I'm quite proud of that. So I did a little mashup of the American Declaration of Independence. I'd like to read to you that now. And I think this should be sort of our manifesto. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all users are created equal, and that they are endowed by hackers with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of content. And that to secure these rights, software is distributed among the users, deriving its powers from their consent, because it's your computer. And that whenever any forms of software becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the users to alter or abolish it, and to institute new software, laying at its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such a way that it shall seem to them most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So it's a very cool thing that a 220-year-old document still really, really works if you just do a search and replace on one of two words. It's very, very timeless. So join the revolution. It's very cool. You meet great people. You have a lot of fun. And sometimes you even get to talk to important people, which can be also a lot of fun. And somebody needs to do it, because there are massive interests in not having this change. I know for a fact that whenever European governments or other governments, for instance in Latin America, make these kinds of moves, they get phone calls from Washington, D.C. And basically those phone calls say, don't do this or else. And the fact that those kinds of phone calls are made tells you that it's really important. And so therefore we need to do it. And if that means taking a free Saturday, then it means taking a free Saturday. So control and civil liberties is like anything else. Use it or lose it. You'll hear that a lot over the next few days with various other things. Use it or lose it is important. And this is also why these events are so important, because we get together here with a bunch of people and we talk this through and we give each other new ideas. And hopefully some more people will join up, basically. Now, one of the things I hear a lot of people, they say, well, but it's so complex. This is such a big issue that, it's hopeless. Also, this is what governments use as excuse to not do anything. They say, oh, it's so big, we're not going to do it. And this is a great example of how you sort of approach that mentally. It was, Napoleon was riding along with the generals in the south of France along the road. It was a hot sunny day, and they're all wearing these woolen uniforms. And everybody was sweating. And Napoleon, he had a bright idea. He said, what we need to do is we need to plant trees along all the roads in France, and then our soldiers can march in the shade to the battlefields. And then they will be a lot, fitter and better rested when they arrive at the battlefield, so they'll be more effective. And of course, all the generals, really wanted to do war stuff and no gardening stuff. So they all started to protest, and they all started to think up reasons why that could not work. And then one of the most senior generals said, well, Mr. Bonaparte, you do realize that if we plant those trees, that it will take 20 years for them to grow tall enough to provide the shade that you're talking about. And Napoleon said, well, of course I understand that. That's why I want you to start planting tonight. And they did. And right now in France, if you go along certain of the old roads back from the 19th century, you can still see those trees. They're still there. So if you want to report for duty to work on this, then there's a chance for that this Saturday in the afternoon in the bike shed, where one of the other people who works on this in the Netherlands very actively, Jelle de Jong, he is doing a workshop. I'll be there too, and we'll be seeing if we can, take this more practical. And of course, him and me, we are about the Dutch government because that's, our government to a certain extent at least, but many of those lessons can be applied elsewhere. So if you want to talk about this and see what you can do in a very sort of down-to-earth manner, then please join us on Saturday. We can have some fun and think up some cool ways to do. There is one other thing. Just across here, in the sun, directly out the door, there is Michiel Leenaerts from the NLNet Foundation, which is a non-profit foundation that financially supports open source projects and IT projects that have to do with things like digital civil liberties. And he has found a way to get money into his foundation, which he will then use to fund open source projects. And if you are here and you have a company, and it doesn't have to be an IT company, you can have a little butcher shop or you can be a tennis teacher, but if you have a company, you can sign his form, then the economics ministry will give him 2,500 euros. And all those little pieces of 2,500 euros put together will finance a bunch of really cool open source projects. For instance, things like Small Sister, which will provide us with secure email. So if you have a company, or if you know anybody on the train who has a company, send them over there to that table, sign the form. You don't have to do anything, but the economics ministry will give an NLNet money, and then we'll use that to do good things. Of course, if you have an open source project you would like to have funded by an NLNet, you can also go and talk to him, and if it's a good idea, he'll give you money to work on the thing you love most. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and if there is time, I'll take some questions. I see we still have 15 minutes, so I'll take some questions, and I thank you for your attention.